Cholera is a historic disease. It's a disease of a textbook. It's something that you should read about, but not experience. In fact, the majority of my colleagues in America, the majority of doctors and nurses, will go to the grave having never seen a single case of cholera, having never had to treat someone here who has cholera. And the treatment and prevention of cholera has been known for over 150 years. It was developed in England by John Snow, who was studying cholera outbreaks as they ravaged England in the 1850s as they currently ravage Haiti. And he noticed, looking at the geographic location of cases, that they seemed to center on a pump, on a water pump on Broad Street. And his conclusion, based on this information, was to go to that pump and stop the cholera epidemic that was ongoing at the time, to end the epidemic and save lives by taking off the handle of the pump. That's all he did. And the epidemic stopped. The field of epidemiology was created. That was 150 years ago. For 150 years, we've known that the origin of an epidemic is absolutely essential. And what we've seen since October 2010 is the United Nations and their colleagues saying that the origin is not important. And the fact is that medical science disagrees with them and has 150 years of proof that says actually the origins are essential. So scientists, 9 research groups across the globe, independently working, came to the same conclusion, that the United Nations introduced the virulent pathogenic strain of cholera that caused the epidemic. And yet, here we are, 2 years later, and not a single thing has been done to prevent that sort of reintroduction again. Because as Jonathan alluded to, there are failures, systemic failures in the United Nations medical screening, in their waste and sanitation protocols, and they were brought up not only by these independent research groups that have published in peer-reviewed journals, but also by the UN-commissioned panel of scientists and engineers and microbiologists. That panel themselves pointed to the UN as the cause based on their research and their data. And yet nothing has been done, despite the UN report giving specific recommendations about how to change the medical screening. For example, the majority, over 75% of people with cholera who can infect you or me are asymptomatic. They don't have diarrhea at all. So for a Nepalese general doing the medical screening, or the United Nations to show their medical records and say, hey, listen, nobody on the space had cholera. Of note, the full medical records weren't disclosed. It was just what they decided to make public. But saying that nobody here has complained of diarrhea is really an irrelevant point, because the people who are going to most likely be contagious and be infectious are not going to have diarrhea at all, but they're going to have been in an endemic area like Nepal, which was experiencing an epidemic. Now, when I talk about a Nepal epidemic, I think it's an interesting thing to point out economies of scale here. The Nepal epidemic was called an outbreak, because it killed 35 people. The epidemic in Kathmandu in August. Cholera has claimed over 7,000 Haitian lives. It's not even on the same scale. And yet again, as I repeat, we are here 2 years later. No changes in policy, no changes in the medical screening, no changes in the waste and sanitation screening, no admission from the UN. And again, when you look at money and watch where the money goes, OSHA, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs at the UN, asked for $8 million to coordinate cholera response. They got less than half of that. MINUSTA got $800 million, and they got every penny. So when you look at where the United Nations is putting their money and putting their priorities, it's clearly not on the people they intend to serve. It's not following their mandate of helping Haitian people and improving water security, which, interestingly, is also a mandate of MINUSTA. MINUSTA is a military mission. This is beyond the scope of this panel, but the idea of a military coming into a sovereign peacetime nation to say, we're going to bring you clean water, is a discussion for another day. But what is interesting is that ever since the Water Poverty Index was created, which is a measure to compare water security in different countries, Haiti, since 2001, Haiti has had the worst water security in the entire nation. Think about the things that have happened in 2001 and beyond. That's comparing it to places like Afghanistan and Iraq and Sudan and Somalia. Haiti has worse water security. Every year that MINUSTA has been there since 2004 and had a mandate to improve water, water security has worsened. This is pre-earthquake. So again, I ask and I urge you guys to think about where is the money going and what does this mean? The evidence has been presented by the scientific and medical community. I'm not an artist, I'm not a journalist, I don't have, a good way with words, but what I do have is science. I have a proven method to present evidence that other people who are smarter than I am can turn into policy. And that has been done over and over and 9 times over again by different people not working together and also by the United Nations. The answer is there. The recommendations are there what to do. In fact, they have been there for a year and a half, and nothing has been done. Why not?